Sure, and I'm Chris Crawford. I started Studio 13 years ago. I joined a landscape architecture and planning firm. I worked in a lot of traditional architecture practices, but really I've always been super connected to site. So I always felt like traditional firms not having landscape architects and people that are really focused on all of the light outside of the building. I thought that was a really important part of the design process. And yeah, worked at traditional firms. I was telling Georgina earlier where a lot of our work was for private people, whether they were developers, and really the focus. I worked in interiors where it was for like commercial telecoms, but it was really creating spaces for people to make money, which wasn't why I became an architect. I became an architect to bring community together. So I started the firm, and we've been really fortunate to have been able to work on a lot of really community-based projects. And I also really believe architecture is a service industry. Like we're doing something for someone else. So that's a huge part of the community is that we're not creating our building that someone uses. We're creating our clients' buildings, and we're really good at understanding the best places in the development program and examining sites and spending time with people to really become translators of what their vision is.
Yeah, so that's just a bit about us, and I think the context of how we came to actually be here is relevant, and that the approach to things is maybe not so traditional in the world of architecture. Both how I came to be here and why Chris started the firm to challenge what is architecture, and then now in the last 7 years, I guess, since I've been here, we've been or less trying to work with different Indigenous groups to make sure that anything that we do with them and for them is reflective of culture and the specific group that it's not. It's very specific to who's going to use this building and the people that are using it. It's not the same, and they all know come from different reserves. Every reserve is different, and every person is different. So having to create space to celebrate that. So today's presentation is really just a fun, I think, a fun one. Highlighting some of the projects that we've done previously, in terms of approach and ways that they work with the site and the land. And you'll see through a couple of them, there's a lot of similar motifs and cultural things that get referenced. But when they're actually built or done in buildings, they become something, they look all very different than each other, even though they're pulling from maybe very similar sources of inspiration. Yeah.
Sure.
We can everything also.
Yeah,
That's
so
what we always do.
we won't stay on this long, but it's a diagram that just kind of highlights all of the pieces of the puzzle that we think about in the design process. So there's the site itself, solar orientation, wind, stormwater, the way the water moves through the site. There's having honor and respect and understanding of the culture that we're working with. Then there's program, just this little one down here. So what is gonna be in the building? How it's gonna be used? Who's gonna use it? How many people? All of those kind of things. And then there's the building form. How can the building form represent a lot of those pieces? And then there is some more regulatory and code and all of the super technical parts of the building that it needs to meet. The sustainability pieces, there's active sustainability pieces like solar panels, but then there's being really smart about how you're designing on a site and taking advantage of the sun to gain that heat from the sun, which a big east facade like this gets really warm in the morning. So just being aware of those kind of things is super important. And then there's the economics of it, which is I think in our current climate of building right now is a really challenging part. It's very expensive to build, so we have to be very smart about how we use spaces, that's refining the program, that's materials, are the materials coming from Spain or can you get them locally? All of them are all integrated into kind of one holistic thing. So it's why I love design and I love that there's all these different pieces of the puzzle and then that kind of translates into a typical kind of project process that we would go through. And that's kind of moving around this circle of getting a project from its very first stages to it being occupied and people getting split in that building space. The core of that is cultural guidance, meaningful engagement, and communication and transparency, which is super important in the process. So
Yeah, so now let's highlight some of the projects that we've worked on previously. And all this is just to show again how what we're doing today can influence a building later on, and maybe something that doesn't seem significant today actually will influence something down the line. Everything's connected. So we'll just show some projects that have gone through that process. Just I find sometimes it's hard to truly imagine, especially in a built way. Everyone knows how to use space, but what does that look like, and how can that be reflected with culture? So this project is a gigantic project. It's actually on my reserve right now. I don't know how much I can actually share, but it's a working center, and hopefully the hope is that it will get rolled out through all communities. And so there's different birthing suites. And so when talking with groups of clients, pulling from these different motifs, 13 moons and connections with women and moon time and phases of life as well was really important. But the community as well, traditional social structures, also came into how do we bring community into this village so everyone feels safe. The significance of water, connection to land, and then pulling from weaving of baskets and traditional architecture like longhouse. So this one, we ended up, there's also like, it's reminiscent of sweetgrass, like I don't know if you've seen it like when the wind blows it down, kind of arcs across, or even the braiding of it. So we took a regular longhouse structure, changed the shape to be reminiscent of like peacock or like fence grass like that. And then we started playing with the massing and pulling it to get that woven look of the building. And then this is what it became. This is a big picture. It's not actually built. This is a rendering. So this is the picture of the vision. And so this is what it would look like if it was built. That was really good. The next one is the Diamond Healing Center. And so this one's a bit different because it's in an urban setting. And it's transitional housing in a way, but more focused on the healing and holistic view of things. And so there's a very large unhoused population in Halifax of Indigenous people. They come up for work or for whatever reasons, and sometimes get lost and don't have their connection to the community. So the Friendship Center in Halifax did this project, and we were lucky enough to be able to work on it. So what was interesting about this was it was actually on a heritage streetscape, and there's a lot of rules there that wanted the building to look like a Victorian building. But that's not what the Friendship Center wants, and that's not what's reflected of the community. And I guess heritage as a topic and whose heritage as a topic was something that got brought up for this. So we, within the bylaws, kind of structured the rules and the meanings of them to get a building that would work for the Friendship Center. So we took a very regular mass, put the roof pitch of the whole thing, pulling it up to the east, and invited being more inviting. And that's what informs the building design. And you can see it's very opposite to everything that's on that street. And so this is what it looks like today. It's actually built, you can see it in Halifax. The whole project is clad in Western red cedar. And you can smell the cedar from the line. It smells so beautiful. And we have an east entry. And as well, just right here is a grate of, it's called raging. So instead of a gutter, it's a way that water can move from the roof down to the earth. And so this is something, an element that often gets forgotten. And maybe people don't tend to spend that much time on it. But we actually went ahead and designed a custom rate chain that looks like a braid of grass. So when you come into the building, that's when you see kind of this first moment, and then you're greeted by the front desk of the staff. This is another shot of it from the other side, and this is kind of highlighting this central gathering space kind of at the bottom, and the height of the focus on gathering and the power of being in community and that within itself. So that's kind of a big piece of it. And this image on the right is a highlight of the millwork inside, and in a way that we're able to weave in culture without just a symbol and weaving it in more of a meaningful way. So this is the front desk. All the boards are painted on one side. So as you walk around, you get more colors. Background, you don't see it, you just get a little of them. So it's kind of a different experience when coming in over. I can talk.
Yeah, I know you can talk. The next project we're going to show you is the Wapna'kikewi'skwaq Learning Center. So this is on the UNB campus, and walk you through. The Wapna'kikewi'skwaq is a beautiful and very important river. And when we started the project, the client group really wanted the building to express that. So we started to look at traditional buildings, which are usually from point A to point B. They're straight linear buildings, and I think the forest and the river both played a huge part in it. So we started to look at like what it's like to actually be within a forest canopy and how that might translate to a built structure. And then these two diagrams here are just really talking about memory. There's the client group was discussing this idea of, you know, people living and using this riverway as a passageway. So the memory of these settlements as they went through the river all kind of played a part in the design process. So we then started to look at the site itself. There was some tree cover on the site, so we wanted to be really sensitive to, you know, not removing trees. So we actually redid our plan after we got a detailed tree survey, and there was very like beautiful big older trees. So we shifted the building and shifted the river to kind of meander around some of these big beautiful trees. And then you can see each of these kind of segments of building kind of tracing that riverway, and the internal circulation through the building is kind of doing that meandering river path. Which then our site team also spent some time looking at, because this is the main corner and it's very public out here, that they treated that kind of like the estuary of a river where it starts to break apart and open up. And this diagram here on the right is, while we're pushing the building form and trying to make it make sense with the site, we're also really working with the client group to make sure that the program makes sense for the site. So a lot of the healing spaces are buried, you know, much further into the forest, where a lot of the public space is moving more toward that street corner. So the program plays a big part in that as well. So yeah, this was I didn't talk about the purpose of the building, which is really amazing. It's UNB has started to change their curriculum. Specifically, I think it was nursing that they've done the most change to really make their curriculum much more relevant and informed by, I think, Indigenous practices, which I think is a huge missed piece of all of our country. Has got amazing teachers and ways of doing things that are much better. And I think nursing is probably the first, because I think healing is something that everybody can learn a lot from. So the fact that they're bringing that into their curriculum, I think, is a really amazing thing, and creating a safe, welcoming space for Indigenous students to be on university campus and see themselves in that space, not feel like they're entering. The context of the campus is a lot of big brick colonial buildings, so I think we really hope that they put some money towards this and make it happen. This is the main entry right on the corner. Got this big entry space here where the kind of skin of this building is lifting up to invite people in, and this is that kind of river estuary of all the planting at the front of the building. And then up into the site, there's a large classroom space which spills out into an outdoor classroom space, and this was one of those feature trees that the whole building kind of related to. And then next we talk about the Friendship Center, which, I mean, you're here because of the Friendship Center, so you should talk about this one. That's how we met.
Yeah, my granddad was at the Friendship Center when they were doing early engagement, and he knew that I was going to be looking for a job since I graduated. And he went after Chris and said, "Hey, I have a friend to keep the job," and that's how I got. So I said I came with the Friendship Center to the van. So I've been there just basically almost as long as we've had a project in the office. And so this project is, again, an urban setting, but it's gone through many phases. In that when they first started, they had no money to fund the project. But of course, everyone believed in it and knew that it was important and had to happen. And Pam at the Friendship Center she's an amazing person, and she really fought to have this building here. And so the many phases of the project were that there was no money, and we made up some of these renderings to help in getting funding. This she always says that they have to see it to believe it. We all can see it in our hearts and in our visions, but to funders, they can't necessarily see our vision. So how can we? And we work with them to create these images to help, get people's pockets open. And then through the phases of getting money, we've also done multiple versions of the building to make it work. So it changed drastically. I don't have all the versions in here to be here but that's a whole presentation in itself. But I'll just highlight some key spaces. This is the interior of the buildings when you first enter, and the main entrance. So it's the first impression that a lot of people will have into the building. And when we're designing the space, we're thinking about what is the connection of people and how do they gather and move around. And so if we look at traditional ways of moving through river systems and using canoes, that was a big inspiration for this space. So if you see the columns in the middle, they're concrete, but they're wrapped in this wood, and they differ, but opening up in different ways. That's to emulate a birch bark tree being, and that process of opening up the tree, and to make it new, to move around and move around. And there will actually be a canoe in this space. They have one at the Friendship Center that will be on site. And on the core in the middle, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a shadow of the that's waterway. The waterway. And that moves through Nova Scotia and was a highway for Mi'kmaq to move around and connect. And so in this building that everyone's coming into, this symbol of connection of communities is front and center. And it's actually going to be made to look like copper on the inside, and that is to pay respect towards water keepers and water ceremonies.
Is that a gloss on it, on the third front?
It's like a plus, not a cross, but
So it's like brand council, so it's just a little gloss on it.
oh, it might be where it seems. But we looked at for the sketch, just other stuff entire. This is the main gathering space of the building, and it's going to host like 350 people. It's a very large space. And again, thinking about how you only gather, and it's always fun, celebrations, dance, music, games, and laugh. And so thinking about all those different cultural elements that go into that and how to translate that into the build space. So between the V's, you can see these fans, and those are supposed to be like the June all around. And then the V's are pulling from a grandfather drum, and you're actually will feel like you'll be inside of the drum when you're in there. And on the floor is the symbol of a Waltz piece on the patterning of the floor. So again, that game, gathering, fun, and yeah, and so it will be like you're in a drum, and that was on purpose in that it's the heartbeat of Mother Earth, and it's the heart of the building, because this is where people will gather and celebrate together. So this is the outside of the building, and directionally entering from the east was important as well for this project. We're a little off east because we still have to work with the site and make it inviting for people. But the top of the building is meant to replicate quill boxes. And it's kind of hard to see, but there's a lot of linear lines, and we've changed the color of certain pieces to look like some of the designs on quill boxes. The base of the building is actually looks like it's rooted in the building, like it came from the earth. It doesn't look like we just placed a building on the site. It was really important that it looked like it was always there. And so how we did that was the base actually runs in these strips, and that was reminiscent of ashers from making baskets. So this became how we treated the bottom facade, and being able to swoop out with these strips allowed us to create planters and to kind of hold the earth with the building. And so the project's called Rematriation, which means come with us. And so this idea of scooping up the earth to come with the friendship center, come inside and really embody like you said, all my relations, everyone's in this building. This is an outdoor space on the other side, and this will be where they hold a lot of their powwows and different gatherings, and it's connected through the whole building. So almost every point that you're in the building, you'll be able to interact in some way with the site. And then to the far left there, hard to see, but that's that event space. That's like the grandfather drum. It actually sticks out of the building, and you see it. It lets light in from the outside. Yeah. So this is the last one we'll talk about. It's my personal favorite. That's Jake's favorites. This is the Under One Sky Friendship Center in Fredericton. This one was a really fun process. They were so excited. Everyone's excited, but they were very involved from the beginning in the design. And actually, when it first came to us, the concept was a longhouse, similar. And they had preliminary design, and they felt like it didn't necessarily reflect what they were trying to do with the building. So we worked with them to really understand what elements about the longhouse are significant. It's not just the structure, it's how you move in and out of it, your connection to the people that are in there, the process of building it, and all these details about the longhouse that are really the structure is important, but coming together to build it, mom's ideas or what makes it so strong. So,
Big Love was a huge part of
oh
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
She was,
Yeah.
yeah.
super sorry.
Yes.
She was given a sign and pin and every time she would come to talk to us, everyone was just like quiet, speak. And she would just talk, and we would come back with so many ideas. And so, yeah, a big thing for them was the longhouse and as well, the Turtle Island and creation story and that connection. And so instead of giving them a building that's shaped like a turtle, maybe it would have been easy for us to have done that and done it faster, but we took again elements of the turtle and started to layer on top of it cultural identity. And so the pieces on the back of the turtle are called scoots. I think.
Yes.
Scoots. I didn't remember this. And so we took each element, which is also like the calendar, and we took each element and then thought about how we move through space. And again, it's not this linear thing. You don't just plow through and go straight A to B. You know, move around, you move around trees and you enjoy being outside or in space. And so that's how I started pulling from that idea. And then layering on top of that, the cardinal directions and their importance and how you enter or move through space or where certain things are directional. And so we worked in a radius for this building, and it was not linear at all. There's barely any straight lines in the whole thing. It was cool, but hard. And so we ended up with the cardinal directions and then thinking about how to move space in a radial way, circular way, and taking the scoots, the pieces of the turtle, and using those as the forms of the building. And it became really organic and felt very natural to the client as well. And so this is the building on the site. Again, it's pretty urban, and layering on top the cardinal directions, we actually celebrate them through, and at each axis is either something very important or a view across and connection to the land.
And always view back to the
Oh yeah.
spire, center.
Yeah, so off that radial point was actually their sacred fire. So we oriented everything around the sacred fire. And so in the middle, it's kind of hard to see here, but that's the fire is. And so at every point that you're in the building, you can look into the center space and see that space. And always have a connection to the land. And then pulling in some of the site context stuff that Chris was talking about before, making sure to look at the sun, look at the wind, and make sure that where you're placing your building will be as efficient and sustainable as possible. And that's just a nice image of it all done.
Is it built?
It is in construction. It was very cool. I got to go for the first time. I was like, I was going to cry because it was just felt very real. And yeah, we're a lot of times in just drawings and in a fictitious world for a long time until it actually gets built. And there's even a sweat lodge on here. Sorry, this east-west axis. There's a sweat lodge, and you can connect all the way in to this other gathering space. So it's kind of this succession of space.
This is sort of what
No, it's just the model.
So is that to represent the head of the turtle? Or is it the eastern door that's representing like
The turtle. Oh, the turtle is not in form.
Yeah, I know it's not
Yeah.
form, but I'm saying like the way that you have it laid out is the door, basically the head of the turtle, and if you want to broaden it, which one.
That's the eastern entry.
Yeah, I suppose it is to start up at all. And you have to really think about it. Something that was interesting with this project, actually, in working with Big Mom, was a lot of times we would, of course, meet with people, learn what was important and what they wanted to incorporate in the building program. And we would do sketches and all that stuff. We actually take it back to Big Mom to show her and get input. And it's just like you just mentioned something, we didn't intentionally do it that way. And she would say like, oh, did you do it this way because of this? And we go, I'd love to say yes, but no. And that's hard to think, you know, and we wouldn't caught that, and it would make this connection and this deeper meaning that we didn't even see in the first place. And I just remember so vividly him saying, it's happening for a reason. Well, God,
When I'm teaching my students, I always reference the turtle, because we're on turtle island. And I always say that's the only.
Yeah, like the turtle eyes, and listen to show the eastern door.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was and the east, it's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, even make that connection. So this is the main entry into the building, and again, this wood slat. There's later on there was some designs added to it to add more detail.
Buildings.
This is the outdoor space, and again, in a similar way that the French Center in Halifax was prioritizing that outdoor space, Underwood Sky also was, and it had a significant part of the site that was left nationalized. It's actually very wet, bog-like area, and it will be used for a lot of their land-based learning teachings that they do with
Would be transferring like street grass and.
yeah, I hope so. Yeah, that's the intention, and even on the site, they looked at doing different gardens with having in relation to the directions. Yes, and yeah, so. And this is that connection, so this is meant to be the sweat lodge to the left, and this connection into the building and through to the rest of the program. And this is just fun. This is the outdoor play space for the kids. They have a daycare center. And so this is their shared outdoor space. And again, trying to incorporate as much land-based learning, natural materials into the space while still being playful for kids. And this is that view from to the center space, to the sacred fire in the middle of the little project. And you can see all the glass all the way around, so that at no point you feel disconnected from that outdoor space. And this is the lobby when you first come in. Again, just reiterating, you get that connection into the main space. Well, see the front desk, and you'll see to the left, they actually utilize this ring of space around as gallery space to show cultural objects and artwork. As a living thing with the building, but it can change and move and it's not stagnant. And this is their community kitchen. It's really important that they had space that we can gather around, food, teach, people sit in, gather fiddleheads, and all that. And this is the main living room space. So along that east-west axis of the sweat, the central fire, and their main gathering space, there's an additional fire on that connections line around of that cardinal direction. And this is just, it was always meant to feel like you're at your mom's house or your grandma's house, and that it's open to everyone and comfortable. So this main living room space was just a place for everyone to gather, elders to youth, and everyone in between, to be together. And this is their main event space. Again, it's meant to hold a lot of people. It was originally intended to be vast timber and is pulling from the 8-pointed star, which also is connected to the lodge like structure. And so we took that and pulled that up to a much larger people. And it's wrapped in wood. And on the doors and panels, there's double more layers to that. So yeah, so unfortunately, like through everything, money and funding is a big thing. So something with this project was once we had started, the economy now is just, it's difficult to navigate. And so they had to make a tough decision to not include this space. There's still the ability that they could add it later, I think. So it's still flexible and that it's hopeful if they ever wanted to add it. But the reality was that they couldn't actually get this part of the building done. So we adjusted it and it's more of a gallery space now, but it still is the full circle. That's just kind of the unfortunate reality of some projects. That would, yeah, so I don't know if it's interesting or anything, but it's just I think it's important to provide context and to give as much information as we can, because I think a lot of times people come into community and just tell us that it has to be a certain way. And we're constantly pushing boundaries of why does it have to be that way? Why can't it be round and circular and work with culture and community? And so, yeah, the hope is just that to show that you can do a lot. And again, that something now might seem small or not relevant, but it could inform the whole project later on. And for Under One Sky, they started with just the longhouse, and it turned into this, which then pulled on a lot of those elements of the longhouse, of the turtle, to create this space that was more reflective of what their goals.
Yeah, no, I think this project is really exciting because it is fully in construction, but it really stands out to me as something that we can't do. We would never think to do this. This is because of people like Meg and community members that were generous enough to share that information, that culture with us, which I take very highly, to be allowed to be in spaces with you and for you to share that information with me. And we deeply respect it, and we do everything we can to make sure that the space and the site is getting to represent that in a very unique way. This is something I never dreamed that I would think of or be. So it's really a reflection of the amazing people we work with, and for the longhouse, I know this doesn't resemble the form of a longhouse in any way, but it does in many other ways, in that it's all of these different program elements. It's the children, it's the elders, it's celebration, it's all of these things happening under one roof, and that interconnectedness and space for people to be together and learn from each other is really a part of the longhouse that I feel like is still a part of this.
What is your business name?
Fathom is, the name came from a unit of measurement, which is fingertip to fingertip. So it's a connection back to people, which is why we do the spaces. And a lot of contemporary architecture is big, massive blocks that don't relate to the human scale. That makes you feel alienated when you're around these featureless buildings. So it was really rooted in that thing. And then Fathom is also, it was used to measure the depth of water. So the depth part is, it's not just architecture, it's the landscape architecture. We do the planning part of it, all of the different parts of the design process, really. So it's kind of based on that. And I love the ocean and water, and we're on the East Coast, so the Fathom and being like a measurement of water depth was another nice thing. Yeah. Other questions or?
So I'm wondering, like, we've had some discussions of the longhouse, and we've had some people putting in different ideas. We've had some people have some visions around what the longhouse looks like. Like Judy Gugu, when she was here for the 7th generation gathering, we're talking about it, saw one of the pillars, one of the beams looking like it was carved so that it looked like sweetgrass. So it's actually the beams were holding it up for sweetgrass. And then lots of conversations with Mig and with Braun and with different people around how the structure of the longhouse actually contains the blueprint of Mi'kmaq governance, of Wabanaki governance, right? And so to me, like I have all these different concepts floating in my head, and then I have some really practical things like, yeah, we need a kitchen. Yeah. And we need bathrooms. And, you know, so I'm just thinking about what's the questions that get asked so that it triggers people's visions, I guess, kind of what I'm asking.
Inspiring.
Yeah, inspiring, because I'm thinking about when we built the wigwam, sort of like the kind of mini longhouse wigwam at wherever we were, Mount St. Vincent's. And when we were putting the beams up, you went like this, and it brought back a memory from your childhood, that structure, the way that it looked, brought back a memory. So I'm just thinking about questions that get asked to sort of draw out those sorts of things before you get into the practical 3 fire pits, no 2 fire pits, like, you know, it's like, yeah.
How do we get visioning? Is that what you're asking?
Those type of conversations, like, do you come in and?
We usually start a project with engagement, and all of those projects that you've seen, we've spent time with people. Some of them have been fairly quick. Some of them, like the Friendship Center, has been 8 years
Okay.
that I've been spending time with that group. So we're usually asking a lot of questions about, we'll use Under One Sky as an example, like the longhouse was very important in that project. So what about the longhouse is important? And is it, the site was very unique in that it was on a busy street on 2 corners. So that idea of protection and looking inward, which you have when you're in a longhouse and you have this beautiful light from above, usually, how do we do that on this urban site and this idea of this circle creating, you know, this is in an urban setting, but when you're in this interior space, it's very safe and protected, and public can't just walk in there. So it allows for those gatherings to happen without it being physically a replication of what the form of longhouse was. So it's really, and back to we call it engagement. We don't typically tell people, a lot of firms would be like, I would come here and like, here's the engagement plan, like, here's what I need from you, and we're gonna do it this way. I generally, our clients are the experts, like, how would you like to be engaged? How would you like to share information? And that is nice when it happens more naturally and is less prescribed, because I think you discover things that you wouldn't expect to discover if you're just being a good listener and being with people and spending time together. Those things start to just happen more naturally. Sometimes we have tight deadlines and we're like, and it never feels good because we're always like, okay, like, what program, like, how many people are going to be in this space? How many, you know, how are we going to use the kitchen? Is it a commercial kitchen? And we get right into a lot more of the technical side of it. But if you put that aside for a bit and get a better understanding of what the meaning of the space is and what the site itself wants to be, because I think the site and land tells you where it wants to have building. And if you focus on, you know, the overarching idea of the building and the program, and you ignore the site itself, it will feel like a building that was just dropped in and it wasn't a part of the land. And I think that's, again, with Under One Sky, we had this piece of land and it is a very urban setting. So we wouldn't, if we had a totally different site, we would have a totally different building. So I think that's why I think it's really amazing that you guys are spending time and organizing and walking the site and just seeing what you discover. I think that's the best part of design, is unstructured, just exploration, and then you start to discover unique ideas. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think I'll just add that sometimes it can be overwhelming, and of course, everyone has ideas, and they're all important and valid, and in some way could be incorporated or are connected. A lot of times too, what it comes down to was, like, on the one side, they knew the programs that they were wanting to offer. And so from there, they knew that, okay, we want to offer them based learning. How do we do that? And so that's what informed, like, oh, well, we need an outdoor space that's naturalized. We need a place that's gathered. We need a workshop so we can make baskets, make splints and all that. And so that started to inform the program of the building. And then, like I said, working with the site and scale and everything to start to put that on there. And then in those stories of how you use space is layered cultural information and connection. And so from those stories is maybe how you pull out how something looks and how it moves and how it formally will work, I guess. But it kind of starts with the program, because I think what's so important as well is how are you going to use the space, because it needs to be reflective of the group that's using it. And so you could sign buildings all day that just don't consider any of that in their rooms and bathrooms and gyms. But what's different is to cater it towards the programs that are being offered. I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So one of the things that when we talked about building the longhouse that most excited the elders right away was when we talked about here will be a space where if you want to do a program with youth, you can come and just do this program with youth. That people are like, you know, like you will have the sacred fire there. You will, you know, and that's what really got people excited was that they will be able to bring youth and be able to do these programs. And then also talking about, you know, being able to have longhouse gatherings. Like last weekend, Gup was here. This became the longhouse room, right? It was set up like a longhouse, and the men's gathering was done in here as a longhouse, you know? So it's incorporating that sort of feeling when you're coming into the longhouse, you know, that feeling of coming in from the east and the way that you feel when you enter into the longhouse, and you feel that connection to the ancestors, and you feel the ceremony, and you feel the strength from the earth coming up. It's so grounding, you know, like you just feel it as soon as you enter into that longhouse. Confession to make. I was pregnant with Tosh when her father was put into the longhouse for 6 months on the West Coast. So I spent 6 months while he was living in that longhouse. So that might be why I'm getting emotional. But that was such a strong connection to the earth. And such a strong connection to the ancestors, and yeah, so it's just really amazing place. So that's for me some of the wanting people to be able to feel that, like, oh my gosh, we're safe in here, and here is our, you know, like, yeah.
Is that what we're going to share this next hour?
How are we doing?
Yeah,
Quarter to 11, we should probably take a break.
Both. Yeah, because it would be good to get input.
Yeah.
I also did want to spend time, and maybe Lonnie can give some direction for that, I don't know. But where those who are able do walk the ground and talk about where might this longhouse be, right?